Late 19th century, Wild West. The hot sun scorches the land relentlessly, and the air is as heavy as a desert. The earth is cracking, with no life in it except for a few cows that Samuel barely manages to feed, and a few horses that weakly pull their work on the farm. Samuel is a man with a hard fate. He is a widower who survived the death of his wife several years ago. His life, once full of joy and hope, has now become grey and lonely. The loss of his loved one has left a deep wound, and he still can't shake the feeling that his life is in the past, those happy days when he and his wife were building their dreams and planning for the future. Now all he has left is the farm, where he struggles to survive day by day. But each step is getting harder. The land, once fertile, is now dry. Each year it becomes harder to get food and keep the house running. Samuel is a man withdrawn and frozen inside. His soul has long been closed off from the world around him, and he feels alien to this cruel, desolate place. He hardly ever leaves the house and avoids socializing with people unless it is to sell or buy supplies. The hot sun scorched the ground, which had long ago become like stone. The dust was thick in the air, and the ground beneath Samuel's feet was dry and cracked. He worked in the field, picking at the earth with a shovel, trying to break through it to sow something, though it seemed almost hopeless. The little house that had once been filled with joy and laughter now looked almost abandoned. Broken equipment lay lying at the foot of the house, some of it made by Samuel's own hands, but nothing worked as it should. He had long since resigned himself to the fact that much of what he had once wanted to do would never be completed. The house was also full of empty rooms, and every corner seemed dead, filled only with memories of his wife and children filling the space with happiness. He walked over to one of his cows that stood by the fence and examined them. Samuel's gaze was tired but attentive. He knew that if they were not productive, he would be left without food.
If this land doesn't bear fruit, if these cows don't work, what am I going to do then?
He looked at the animals, but there was no certainty in his soul. His hands tightened around the shovel, and he bent to the ground again, trying to fight what seemed insurmountable. The fence was in bad shape. Several boards rotted away, and the partially collapsed structure indicated that time and harsh conditions had not spared the place. The ground he walked on was red-hot and cracked. The only sound that broke the silence was the sound of his footsteps as he moved across this dead, barren land. The weather was unbearably hot, and even the sun was beginning to set, but it brought no relief. There was not a cloud on the horizon, and Samuel knew that another cold night was coming, one in which he would have to contend with loneliness and the cares of the farm. It was then that he noticed a strange silhouette in the distance, barely visible in the hazy light of sunset. He stopped, listened, and for a moment forgot everything: the land, the work, the pain of loss. Something about that silhouette made him uneasy, a vague sense that his solitude was about to be broken. Samuel stared tensely at the silhouette, trying to make out who it could be. At that moment, the wind blew even harder, and dust swirled around him. He put his hand up to his eyes to get a better look, but the figure remained distant and indistinct.
What is it? Who could be in such a harsh desert?
The figure kept moving, and Samuel felt more and more strongly that this encounter would change something. He didn't know what to expect from this strange apparition. His soul was a mixture of curiosity and wariness, but at the same time he felt that his life, which had been consumed by a heavy loneliness, might finally have something. He got up and headed towards the house, still peering at the silhouette in the distance. It was the beginning of something new, something unclear, but Samuel felt that he couldn't just turn away and forget what he was seeing. Samuel continued to stare at the silhouette in the distance. He couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't an accidental appearance. The figure was getting closer, and with each step it became clearer. At first he thought it might be a wanderer traveling through these barren lands, but as the figure drew closer, he realized that it was a woman accompanied by children. The woman walked slowly, struggling to support one of the boys who could barely stand on his feet. Her clothes were dirty and worn, and her face was covered with signs of fatigue and pain. The children walked beside her, but their steps were as slow and uncertain as their mother's. Samuel frowned. He hadn't expected to encounter strangers in this desolate place. His life was complicated enough to still worry about other people's problems. But when he noticed that one of the children was barely hanging on, his heart clenched. The woman, despite her weakness, stepped closer, stopping a few steps away from Samuel. She looked up at him, desperation in her eyes. She spoke with difficulty, her voice hoarse, like a man who had not spoken for a long time and had no strength at all.
Please, help. We're lost. The children are sick. We can't go on. She wipes the sweat from her forehead and looks at the children, trying to pull herself together. We were on our way to town, but the horse couldn't take it. We need shelter, food, at least some water.
Samuel stood there, not knowing what to do. He was not prepared for such an encounter, and doubts filled his mind at once. He didn't know if he could trust these people. His life was hard, and he didn't want to add another burden to it.
How did you end up here, so far from the city? Couldn't you get here on your own, or was someone with you?
We were with the horses. They couldn't take it. We didn't get there in time. The children are sick. I don't know what to do. Her gaze falls on the children, and she pauses to deal with her emotions. Please, we can't go any further. We need help.
Samuel felt his heart clench. He saw the children struggling to stand, one of them barely on his feet, and the other, a girl, looking similarly haggard and depressed. He noticed their skinny, dusty faces and felt his inner world confronted again with the question of whether or not to help. He took a step forward, despite his initial hesitation. He was not a man who opened his heart easily, but this situation was too obvious to ignore.
I'll help you, but only for the night. You need to regain your strength. There is water and some food in my house. You can stay until tomorrow, but I promise you nothing more.
Sara looked at him with disbelief, but also with gratitude. There was hidden fear in her eyes, but she realized that this was the only chance for her children.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't know what we would have done without your help.
Samuel nodded and then turned quietly to the children.
Go on, don't just stand there. I'll walk you out.
The boy, who could barely stand on his feet, stepped forward timidly, clinging to his mother's hand. The girl, who had almost lost her strength, looked at Samuel, hesitant to take the first step. But when she saw him nod, she too moved toward the house. Samuel helped them into the house, holding one of the children who could barely move. As they passed into the shadows, Samuel closed the door behind them, and his gaze fell again on the three children who, despite their fatigue and suffering, looked so much like his own children he had lost years ago. When the door closed, there was silence in the house. This wasn't just a meeting, this was the beginning of something that would change his life. He didn't know what would happen next, but he was sure he couldn't take it all back. After Samuel closed the door and ushered his new guests into the house, he felt his chest grow heavy. The house that had been silent and lonely was now filled with sounds, silent footsteps, faint breathing, and barely audible words. There was a strange mixture of weariness and tension in the air, and Samuel didn't know how to act. Samuel made his way in silence to the hearth. He lit the fire, added some wood, and began to cook some food. It was hot, but he knew that everyone needed some food and warmth. Sara, despite her exhaustion, was determined to take care of her children. She sat down next to one of the boys and hugged him, checking his condition. The boy, who was the weakest, looked up to his mother, his eyes full of pain but also trust. The girl sat next to her, head tilted, and the third boy, the most stubborn, was already trying to hold back tears.
I don't have much to offer, but I have some meat and potatoes. It's better than nothing.
Sara nodded, her eyes meeting his gaze for a moment. She saw him not just as a farmer who had decided to make a gesture of kindness, but as a man perhaps going through the same pains as she was. But this was not the moment for questions. She looked at her children, upon whom all her care lay.
Thank you. It's a lot for us. For them, they can barely stay on their feet.
Samuel placed some food on the wooden table. He could see how the children could not hide their hunger, but despite this, their feeble attempts to politely ask their mother for permission to start eating showed how deeply they had been brought up. Sara smiled with an effort and told them.
Eat up, kids. You deserve it.
As they began to eat, Samuel and Sara exchanged a glance, and for a time the room was silent, with only the creak of wooden chairs and the sound of the fire to break it. Samuel realized that this evening was not just an act of kindness, it was the beginning of something deeper, perhaps a change he could not realize. After they had eaten, everyone gathered around the fire outside. Samuel brought out an old iron skillet on which he fried the food, and at the same moment Sarah's eyes filled with weariness and gratitude.
Nothing much, but hopefully at least a little relief for you.
It's more than I could have expected. It's hard on us, but we're alive.
How did you end up here in the Wild West? What brought you to these parts?
Sara didn't answer right away. The fire of pain flashed in her eyes for a moment, but she pulled herself together. She realized that this night would not just be a moment of rest, but a chance to share a piece of her soul.
My husband was a sheriff. He served here in these parts. We lived in town, but everything changed when he was, killed. It was a few years ago. I tried to cope, but, it didn't work. Since then, all we've done is try to survive.
She was silent, her gaze staring off into the distance, into the dark desert. The same gaze Samuel had seen years ago when he'd lost his wife.
Life can be cruel at times. We all have our losses. Yeah, lost my wife a few years ago. It's hard to go through that. We can't always keep it to ourselves.
Sara turned to him, and it was clear on her face that she hadn't expected such a revelation. There was a mixture of surprise and appreciation in her eyes. They were both silent for a few moments, feeling their souls, though not fully open, begin to reach out to each other like two lost travelers who lacked each other's understanding. Sara turned to him, and it was clear on her face that she hadn't expected such a revelation. There was a mixture of surprise and appreciation in her eyes. They were both silent for a few moments, feeling their souls, though not fully open, begin to reach out to each other like two lost travelers who lacked each other's understanding. Samuel noticed how the children were trying to adapt to this new situation in their own way. In spite of their distress, their lively, sincere looks reminded him of something long gone.
How do you like the city? Have you ever been interested in going there?
Yes, interesting. I'd like to see the city. There are a lot of people there, aren't there? Lots of horses and... He stops talking, not knowing what else to say.
Robert, I want Mom not to cry. I want to be strong, but I can't.
Samuel looks at him and feels a slight prick of pain. He can't help but remember how his own children used to say similar things before they left. He realizes how hard it is to relive those moments and instinctively reaches out to support the boy. Several days passed. Sara, despite her efforts, could not recover. Her health deteriorated, and soon she could not get out of bed. High fever, weakness, and painful bouts of coughing all wore her down to the breaking point. The children, though a little stronger after eating and resting, were still weak. Robert continued to hardly get up, and Thomas, though more stubborn, could hardly help his mother. Samuel did not know what to do. Until a few days ago, he might have considered his problems the most important, but now his life was filled with other people's worries. He was alone, and now he had to care not only for himself, but also for the women and children whose lives were in his hands. He felt a great responsibility for other people's fates, but it also meant that his own plans and dreams seemed to be drifting further away. Samuel tried treating Sara gently. He helped her sit up, fed her, but her condition did not improve. He searched his own medicine, but there wasn't enough to deal with such an illness. Tension was growing in his soul. He was not used to asking for help, not used to depending on other people. There was no room for weakness in his life. Everything was always in his hands. Everything always had to be done by himself. Now, however, he realized that he could not handle this burden alone. Sarah's pain and illness were becoming more and more apparent every day, and his powerlessness to deal with the situation tormented him.
How could I not have noticed it before? How could I leave her like this?
An internal conflict was beginning to swirl restlessly in his head. Samuel realized that he needed to find a cure for Sara, but the thought clashed with his pride and his beliefs about self-sufficiency. It was unimaginable for him to ask for help, but the only way to save Sara was to go to the nearest town. He stood in front of her bed, looking at her and not knowing how to proceed. And so, in the evening, when the silence of the house was broken only by Sara's faint breathing, he made a decision. After a few days of watching Sara and the children, Samuel realized that the only way to help them was to get to the nearest town where they could find medicine. It was a dangerous journey, full of unknown dangers, bandits, wildlife, and the journey itself was grueling. But Samuel couldn't afford any other choice. He realized that his life could no longer remain the same. Leaving Sara and her children without help would be tantamount to a judgment.
I'll do it. Not for my own sake. For them. For her.
He decided that he would set out at dawn. But the night before that decision was hard. Samuel could not sleep for a long time. His thoughts were confused. How would he get back? How would he deal with the dangers? But in the end, he knew he had to return with the medicine, or he would lose everything. The next day, as soon as the first rays of sunlight crept through the window, Samuel accepted his bag and prepared to leave. He nodded to the children, who were struggling to stay on their feet, and Sara looked up despite her illness.
Are you going to?
I'm going into town to get some medicine. Stay here. I'll be back soon.
You're not leaving, are you? You're not going to leave us?
Don't worry. I'll be back. I won't leave you.
Thomas didn't say anything, but there was something tense, anxious in his gaze. He realized that Samuel was their last hope, but he was a child, and the fear that sat in his chest was too strong. Samuel cast a glance back at the house, at the fact that he knew he was staying with him. He had to do this, despite everything. As if chasing the doubt away, he walked through the door and out into the deserted prairie. The road was long and the way was dangerous. Samuel rode his horse, trying not to hurry, but not to slow down. Every movement of his body felt like pain, like the need to keep moving. The landscape beyond the horizon was harsh and barren. The desert stretched for kilometers, and he knew that in a few days he would face real dangers. And so, as day began to give way to night, Samuel faced his first challenge. He had to spend the night sleeping in one of the rocky crevices. The sounds of wild animals could be heard, and in every shadow lurked a threat. He slept for only a few hours, his eyes remaining alert, listening for every rustle. But his resilience, and most importantly, his hope for Sara's help, kept him from giving up. The next day, as he continued his journey, Samuel met bandits who for a moment made his heart clench with fear. But he managed to evade them, outwitting them by maneuver and stealth. Every move he made was calculated, every step dictated by his determination to get back to Sara. Despite all the dangers, Samuel continued on his journey, full of danger, but confident that he must return with the medicine. And he wasn't going to stop, even as his strength began to wane. Several weeks passed. Sara was slowly getting better. The children put on weight, played in the yard again, and helped with chores. Their laughter filled the silence of the old farmhouse for the first time in a long time. Samuel began to notice a change in himself. What had once seemed alien to him was now part of his daily routine. One of the boys, Thomas, had grown especially close to him. Stubborn and businesslike, he followed Samuel around the farm from morning to night, asking thousands of questions and trying to help him with everything.
Mr. Samuel, I can carry this. I really can. I'm a big boy now.
You're as stubborn as a mule, Thomas. But thank you.
Were you like this when you were little?
Was more stubborn, even. Only no one said it was a good thing back then.
In the evenings, Samuel and Sara sat by the fireplace. The children had gone to bed and the house was quiet. At such times, they began to have conversations that they had avoided before.
Thomas. He wasn't always like this. He got serious after their father died. He's seen too much for his age.
Losing changes children and adults too.
Sara lowered her eyes.
He was a good man. John, a sheriff. Smart. Strong. Never would have let us get in trouble if it hadn't been for that gunfight.
My wife died of a fever. I didn't even get to say goodbye. That's when I decided I wasn't gonna let anyone else close. Never again.
Silence. Their stories intertwine like two roads crossing somewhere in the middle of the desert.
Losing changes children and adults too.
Sara lowered her eyes.
He was a good man. John, a sheriff. Smart. Strong. Never would have let us get in trouble if it hadn't been for that gunfight.
My wife died of a fever. I didn't even get to say goodbye. That's when I decided I wasn't gonna let anyone else close. Never again.
Silence. Their stories intertwine like two roads crossing somewhere in the middle of the desert.
But you let us in.
Because the heart sometimes knows better than the head.
This closeness frightened him. He felt like he was starting to live again. But along with it came fears of losing again, of being too weak, of not being able to cope. A few days later, a rider came to the farm, tall, in a dusty cloak, with a smirk on his face and danger in his eyes. It was Jed Garrett, a former handmaiden of John's old enemy, Sarah's late husband. With him were two others, rough and armed.
Hello, farmer. Heard you got a sheriff's widow hiding out here now, and she's got something very valuable with her. Papers. Gold. Maybe you can tell us where it is.
There's nobody here but me, the kids and the sick woman. There's nothing for you to do here.
Oh, so you're a defenseman now, out of rank. But that's okay. We'll be back tomorrow. And hopefully you'll be more talkative by then.
Samuel watched in silence as the bandits drove away. His jaw was clenched, his fists bloody from the way he'd clenched them. Inside, everything was boiling. In the evening, he told Sara,
It's Jed Garrett. John had him in his sights. But then he managed to escape. He always knew about our stash.
What's in the stash?
Not gold. A map. Information about the arms dealers John was fighting. If it falls into their hands, people will die.
Samuel stood up, as if he had more strength.
Then he won't get that map. I won't.
He began to prepare. He checked his gun, reinforced the windows, built a barricade at the entrance. His eyes were no longer the eyes of a lonely farmer, but the determination of a man with someone to protect. Late at night, he stepped out onto the porch. Thomas sat beside him, cradling an old blanket.
You won't let them take us?
No way, boy. I swore to myself I wouldn't lose anyone else. Now I swear it to you.
It's a deep night. Lightning flashes over the horizon. A cloud is coming, driven by the wind. There is anxiety, tension, anticipation in the air. Inside the house, Samuel sits at the window with his rifle, staring out into the darkness. Next to him is Sara. She is tying back her hair, having changed into more comfortable clothes. Her face is calm, but her eyes are determined.
You need to be with the kids, Sara.
They're asleep. And I'm here. We'll get through this together, Samuel.
It's the first time he's heard her say his name so confidently. He nods, doesn't argue. This is no longer a frightened widow. This is a woman ready to stand up to the end. Suddenly, there's a gunshot. The bullet pierces the shutter. The children in the upstairs room jump up screaming.
Mr. Samuel, they're in here!
Samuel rushes to the window, firing back quickly. Sara grabs a second gun, loads it with shaky but steady hands.
Can you shoot?
I'm the sheriff's wife. Of course I can.
3 bandits hide behind a barn. One lights a torch and throws it towards the house.
Sara, to the well. A bucket of water.
She nods, popping out onto the veranda. A bullet whistles nearby. Sara ducks, but doesn't stop. Samuel covers her with fire. Sara manages to throw water on the blazing grass before the flames spread. Thomas comes out onto the stairs with a hunting knife.
I want to help too.
No, you protect your brothers. This is your fight. Do you understand?
Got it.
He steps back, leading the younger ones into a closet where bullets won't get them. Jed and another bandit try to break through the back door to the house. Samuel, hearing a rustle, runs out of the kitchen, coming face to face with them.
Well, here we are, Farmer. Now die.
Jed shoots. Samuel manages to dodge, his bullet hitting the corner of the wall. Samuel rushes forward, knocking the bandit to the ground. A fight breaks out. Jed pulls out a knife. At that moment, Sara appears in the doorway, takes aim and fires. The bullet hits Jed's shoulder.
Get away from my house.
Samuel takes out his opponent with the butt of his gun. The second bandit surrenders after seeing the couple's determination. The third is already dead from a hit at the window. Silence. Breathing heavily, Samuel sits down on the porch. Sara sits down beside him. Their faces are sooty and sweaty, their hands shaking. Inside the house, children can be heard crying.
We made it through.
We, together.
He turns to her. For the first time in a long time, he doesn't feel lonely. Only warmth. Hope. Family. It's morning. The first rays of the sun are softly falling on the farm. The ground is soaring after the recent rain. The air is fresh. The sky is clear. In the background are the sounds of roosters, hooves, the clinking of buckets, and children's laughter. Samuel comes out of the house. His face is calm, smiling as he watches Thomas help carry the hay. Luke and Benny, the younger triplets, chase each other, squealing with joy. Sara sits on the porch, peeling apples.
Thomas, don't put everything in one place. The cows won't get enough to eat.
Don't put everything in one place. Like, I don't know, Samuel.
Already you're learning to argue, which means you're growing.
He walks over to Sara, sits down next to her. For a moment there is silence between them. A confident, calm silence. The kind that comes not from fear, but from understanding. I fixed the fence on the south side. Now the coyotes won't get through.
You started talking about the future. Tarnat Taft Yab. That's good.
He looks at her, long and thoughtful. In his gaze is not just gratitude, not just respect. There's a new feeling there. Real, mature, past the pain.
You changed everything, Sara. At first I thought I'd saved you. Now I realize you saved me.
I was just moving forward. I didn't think about who I was saving. But if you found yourself in it, then it was not in vain.
Do you want to stay? Not as a guest, but as the hostess of this house.
I've been home a long time, Samuel. I was just afraid to admit it.
Life is not only what we lose, it's what we find when we least expect it. I've lost a lot, but I found more. I found family. I found love. And finally I found home. Not in walls, but in the people around me.
Samuel and Sara are sitting by a small fire. He tosses a dry branch into the fire, and she holds a mug of warm tea. Behind them is a house with yellow light pouring in through the windows. The children are sleeping there.
See that star over there? I kept thinking it was her, Rose, looking down at me from above, making sure I'm not completely down.
And now?
Now I think she just wanted me to start living again, to remember that I'm still alive.
Sara doesn't answer right away. She looks up at the sky, then at him.
When I lost Jacob, I thought I was dead too. And then, the children. Every step they took was like a small victory. But still, I was alone.
You're not alone anymore, Sara.
She nods. A tear rolls down her cheek, but not from pain, from relief.
And you're not alone anymore, Samuel.
They take hands. The campfire crackles. A shooting star flies across the sky.
What's your wish?
I've already got it all.
Sometimes you have to get lost to find yourself. Sometimes, to learn to love again, you have to live through loneliness to the end. And then, amidst the ashes, amidst the wind, amidst the silence, she comes. Hope.